Chapter 8. Forgive me, God, Helen sobbed as she smacked the suction cup against the wall, licked and sucked all over the head, unable to stop visualizing the young man. Helen stripped naked as Eve, gripping the wall and eased her hips back. Oh, yes. Lord, yes. Helen raised her leg, easing the dildo inside until her eyes rolled to the back of her head, catching her breath and releasing her orgasm. Helen remained on her knees, panting. She prayed for God to remove her desire for black men for so long. Throughout her childhood in an all-white neighborhood, Helen always attracted black men's attention for her hips and butt. White men rarely noticed her until she met Scott. Scott worked out and exercised with her, and they improved their diets. Instead of losing weight, Helen's butt grew tauter and more voluptuous. She dressed to hide the body that brought her so much shame. Yet at least once a month needed to try her new form of prayer whenever she felt unloved, knowing here, in this room, she could be delighted with herself and understand what she truly wanted. Once they moved upstate New York, she couldn't stop the attention and flirting she received from black men, with only her convictions preventing her from resisting the adoration. In some ways, it scared her to think wherever she went, some black men would flirt with her, until a man informed her it was because of the same butt she hated so dearly. Her wardrobe changed, and she spoke about the attention less to Scott, keeping it as her secret and guilty pleasure whenever she was out shopping alone. Her father and grandfather were lifelong Democrats, calling themselves the true Democrats for the beliefs in protecting their interests as whites. They believed non-whites were incapable of living without whites, so white people needed to control everything, predominantly non-white resources and labor, out of a fear of mismanagement. Her mother and grandmother were both thicker women as well. Helen and her daughter Piper accrued endless ridicule and abuse for their Eastern European body shapes. Helen suckled all over the dildo she's had since her teens, when the attention began. She locked herself in her room all weekend with a bottle of lubricant until it was time for church on Sunday. The KKK preacher told her the evils of integration and the dangers of black people. Helen then rushed home after church to return to the deed. She carried her desire with shame, hiding it so far deep it bubbled up in hatred. Helen felt it possible to overcome her lust with hatred. She eased herself back on her dildo, speaking tongues, and began fitting it halfway in before needing to hop off. Helen had fallen asleep in her prayer room from exhaustion, imagining the young gardener rearranging her insides. Helen was found naked with the dildo inside her body, as she had started writing it before passing out from her orgasm. "Sophia!" Helen cried out. "Senora, are you okay? The screaming." Whatever do you mean?" Helen tried covering herself with her clothes, but hadn't had time to put them on before Sia raised the giant piece of silicone. "You want this?" Sophia asked, removing her ruse and speaking in her native Brooklyn accent. "Yes, please. Just give it back, and we can keep this all a secret." Helen begged like an addict. Sophia shuddered, feeling powerful as she slapped the phallus in her hands. Helen bent over, grasping her legs, thrilled as Sophia stuffed her like a turkey. Sophia took out her frustrations on her mistress, pumping her as she watched Jabari do Piper. Helen thanked her profusely, the first time Sophia ever remembered Helen saying thank you, as Helen squirted and creamed all over the phallus. Sophia shoved the entire phallus inside of Helen, believing she had killed her for a second until Helen began blinking and nodding her head. "Thank you, Sophia." Helen weakly raised her hand. "You people are crazy." Sophia put away her cell phone camera, in the perfect position to capture it all, yet Helen was too inebriated from ecstasy to notice. To Helen it was all a dream, and it never happened. Sophia closed the door, locking it before leaving so no one else would find Helen. Sophia went back to her room in the home. She was replaying the video, laughing hysterically at how such a racist white woman could have such a hunger for black men. Sending it to her husband. It seemed equivalent to the highly homophobic members of Christ. It seemed equivalent to the highly homophobic members of Congress being homosexuals themselves, too ashamed by social pressure to admit who they are, and too scared to be happy, so they ruined the lives of people who had acceptance.